To turn to Matthew chapter 2. Our one intent, of course, through this whole study of the wise men, in fact, the whole intent of everything is to somehow bring you into an intimate relationship with Jesus. And if you are in an intimate relationship with Jesus, to intensify that and to blossom that and to make it stronger in your life than it's ever been before. That's the whole intent. There's no other agenda. There's no hidden con. It simply is all wrapped up in you and an intimacy with Jesus that will just not let you go. And that is our supreme desire. How are we doing with the guys in the hall? So we really want to expose our lives to His presence. And the thing I've found out, I know that you have found this out too, that once you see Him, He captures you. He absolutely captures you. It becomes addictive. If you get away from it, you look back and say, oh, those were the best days. When I knew Him, when He was a part of my life, when He was intimate with me, and I was intimate with Him. That becomes the key. So that's the whole intent of what we're doing here. So in the last 2 Saturday nights, we've looked at this phenomenal story, which is the story of the wise men. And again, Matthew's the only one that gives this, and I want to read it for you again as we look at Matthew chapter 2, verse 1. Now after Jesus was born in Bethlehem of Judea in the days of Herod the king, behold, wise men from the east came to Jerusalem, saying, where is he who has been born King of the Jews? For we have seen his star in the east, and have come to worship him. When Herod the king heard this, he was troubled, and all Jerusalem with him. And when he had gathered all the chief priests and the scribes of the people together, he inquired of them where the Christ was to be born. So they said to him, in Bethlehem of Judea, for thus it is written by the prophet. But you, Bethlehem, in the land of Judah, are not the least among the rulers of Judah, for out of you shall come a ruler who will shepherd my people Israel. Then Herod, when he had secretly called the wise men, determined from them what time the star appeared. And he sent them to Bethlehem and said, go and search carefully for the young child. And when you have found him, bring back word to me that I may come and worship him also. And when they heard the king, they departed. And behold, the star which they had seen in the east went before them till it came and stood over where the young child was. And when they saw the star, they rejoiced with exceedingly great joy. And when they had come into his house, they saw the young child with Mary his mother. And they fell down and worshipped him. And when they had opened their treasures, they presented gifts to him, gold, frankincense, and myrrh. Then being divinely warned in a dream that they should not return to Herod, they departed for their own country another way. Let's bow in prayer. Jesus, we are open to you tonight. And we want to grasp the truth of your kingdom and what you want to be in us. So sorry, God, for all the sidetracking and all the distractions in my life, all the things that have gotten in my way, that I've allowed to get in my way, to finding you and knowing you. There's something about the wise men that captures me. The sincerity of their heart, the desire of their being. I want what they had. They didn't have right theology. They were pagans. They were off the wall. They were astrologers. They didn't know anything about Israel. They didn't know about prophecies. They didn't know about the scriptures. But somehow you got a hold of them. And you captured them until they had a drive that just brought them to your feet. With no expectation of getting anything out of it except giving to you. And Lord, I want to be captured by that kind of inwardness. That kind of vision of you, that knowing you on that level where I would bow at your feet and give you everything I've got. So whatever is blockading that in my life, I ask you to remove it. Whatever is stopping that in my thought process, I ask you to clarify the confusion. Whatever doubts that enter into my heart that won't let me bow and bring everything to you and trust you, I pray that you would just remove those doubts, clarify, reveal. Let your word speak to us tonight, I pray thee. We give ourselves to you for that purpose. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen. We've been focusing on the issue of kingship, that Jesus is king. And I know that none of us here would disagree with that. We'd all say amen to that Jesus really is king. And I buy that, you buy that, so that's a settled issue. The thing about Matthew is that he declares a kingship that's altogether different, and that's the kind of thing we've been trying to talk about. Because when you get down to the details of what his kingship is all about, then you begin to look at it and say, whoa, wait a minute, I don't mind him being king, but I'm not so sure I want him to be that kind of king in my life. That it is such a radical kingship. It is such a different approach to kingship. It's so strange that we have no way to identify it, and there's no illustration of it in our society or among us. In other words, you can't look at anybody in our political system and say, that's the kind of king Jesus is. You can't go to the kings of our world and look at them and say, that's the style of the kingship of Jesus. Because his kingship is so upside down. It's so opposite. There's such a radical thing going on. And I want to grasp that. I want you to grasp that with me. And one of the things we've been looking at, I think the first Saturday night that we started dealing with this, we established the fact that Jesus is king. And I don't want to spend a lot of time on that, only to just walk you through the passage as you get into the wise man's story. There's no way to look at this story without coming out with the conclusion that Jesus is king. Now, you may say, well, he's not king in my realm. That's fine. But you've got to say that Jesus is king in the realm of the wise men. And what's going on in the passage? The passage is distinctly, directly proclaiming him as the king. There isn't any question about that. For instance, you see it as we saw, you see it in the searching of the wise men. What has got a hold of them? What is driving them? Why would they make such sacrifices? Why would they go to all this trouble? Why would they travel 2 years on a camel? Why would they give their wealth? Why would they spend all this time? Why would they travel with an army as they did? Why would they go to all of this exertion living out of tents? What is the purpose of all of this? And of course, you can only come back to one conclusion. They've seen a star and there's a declaration of the kingship. So they are captured by the fact that Jesus is a king. So you wouldn't capture them with new theology, and you wouldn't capture them with a new philosophy. They're not into that. But this whole business of kingship, that got a hold of them because Jesus is the king. It's determined and proclaimed by the searching of the wise men. It's also determined and proclaimed by the star's appearance. Obviously, the way God spoke to these boys is through the planets. The stars spoke to them. And I have no question in my mind, but what God literally created, a spatial star, just for this occasion, jammed it into place and said, hey, talk to these boys. And there is a proclamation from the stars. And brother, when the planets start talking to you, you better pay attention. And they are proclaiming the kingship of Jesus. So the heavenlies are open to this. And you got angels filling the galaxies, man, singing, and shepherds are moved. And you got all of this going on in the heavenly realm, which is just phenomenal. Just absolutely phenomenal. And not only that, but we looked at the idea of the setting of the scene. This is all done in Bethlehem, which is just all over the place in prophecy in declaring the kingship of Jesus. Because this is the city of David. This is where David was anointed. This is as king. This is where David did his thing. This is where his parents, his grandparents were married. The history literally comes out of Bethlehem, which is the history of kingship. So the very setting itself literally yells at us. Of course, the struggle of the hour also gives this idea of kingship. Because what you've got going on is you've got Herod is troubled and all Jerusalem with him. And what's he going to be troubled about? Come on, he's not going to be troubled by somebody showing up saying, I'm going to run for office. He's going to be upset by an army parked outside his door and a wise men running up and down saying, there's a new king who just showed up and you're in trouble, Herod. That's what's going to upset him. So the very struggle that's going on, and of course out of that came the seduction of evil, which declares kingship. The devil is on the rampage. You see that strongly in the passage as Herod secretly pulls them aside and all the deception that goes on and all that's taking place, which is, of course, the next idea. It's the very seduction of evil itself, and all of that is against his kingship because it's being proclaimed, and evil can't stand that, and everything that doesn't line up with his kingship literally begins to cry out, and that's happening all over the passage. And of course, then you see it in the submission of the wise men as they bow at the feet of a baby who doesn't have an army, who doesn't have wealth, who isn't in a fine palace, who has none of the trappings of what we would call kingship. And yet these boys are bowing at his feet, acknowledging the whole thing. So when you walk away from all of this, you say, wow, he must be king. There's too many things coming into the passage that are literally proclaiming and making it known that God is from every angle literally declaring Jesus Christ is king. Now again, none of us would have any struggle with that. I don't think. I think we'd all say, okay, God can be king, good for him, let him have it. In fact, that brings us to the next idea, which is Jesus is a universal king. And we talked about this last Saturday night. That Jesus is a universal king. See, you can't push this aside like this is, well, that's a nice little Jewish nation. Yeah, they're a little cluster of people in a small minority of folks gathered in a small little location called Palestine, and they've got this big thing going on in their mind that they're going to have a king, and good for them, they can have one. And Jesus is that king. See, you can't isolate this to them. Because this whole business of his kingship explodes into the realm of the universes. And that, I tried to express this last Saturday, and of course didn't do a very good job of it, but the idea, folks, that he is king over everybody. Well, I wasn't raised in Christianity. I was raised a Muslim. It doesn't make any difference. Jesus is still your king. This is not about a United States, in God we trust, Western civilization idea about Jesus. See, that's what you were raised in. That does not determine his kingship. What you think or what you don't think is not what determines his kingship. He just plain flat, in the universal sense, is a king of every man, every place, everywhere, under all circumstances. And every knee, do you believe that? Every knee is going to bow, whoever you are. And whatever religion you may have said you are into, this is a big deal, folks. A big deal. In fact, I quoted to you the parable of the sheep and the goat thing, and how that thing starts when Jesus tells that parable. It talks about when Jesus comes in all of his glory, sits on the throne of his glory, and he gathers all the angels are going to come with him, and he's going to gather all the nations of the world. Come on, we're not just we got our little opinion in the corner singing Hold the Fort Till Jesus Comes. See, that's not what's going on here, folks. This is a big deal. And of course, you see that all over the passage. The Gentiles from the east, the pagans, Gentiles from the east are getting in on this. Why? Because Matthew, at the outset of his gospel, I know he's writing to Jews, I got that. But from the very outset of his gospel, in the genealogy, as well as in the story of the wise men, he keeps injecting this idea that, hey, this is a big deal, folks. This is what's going on in the Gentile world as well. That this whole purpose is to affect the entirety of all the universe itself. So the Gentiles are involved in this. We've already mentioned the galaxy of the skies. The whole, man, wouldn't it be something if there are planets in another galaxy that God is literally affecting through this Jesus that we don't even know about? Oh. This is a big deal. Jesus is a universal king. Guys like Herod the Great, the governors of the world, are literally distressed by him. See, he's not an individual who just can be set aside, because he is a universal king. And all through the passage, and there's a whole sermon on this itself. God is constantly protecting. Don't you think that's phenomenal? That God is constantly protecting this king. Just try to kill him. See how you get along. How's it working out for you, Herod? Whoops, you're dead. See, what? You don't survive when you come up against this king. Because this is a big deal. Now, that brings us to what we want to talk about tonight, which is Jesus is the only king. See, Jesus is not, we have a gathering of all the kings of the world, and they gather around the big oak table, and Jesus comes and joins us. He's one more. Yeah, that's your seat there, Jesus. And he's sitting next to, no, there's only one guy at the table. Because the bottom line is, he is the only king. Everyone else is usurping, who claims to be king, is usurping the throne. Which we could go into a long discussion of what sin is. Because that's the bottom line of all sin. Usurping the throne of who he is. In fact, you and I know that the first sin was all about what? I decided I want to be my own king. I'm going to pick of the fruit to know the knowledge and the information that will allow me to be my own king. But when it comes down to it, the only king that can be is Jesus himself. He is the king. Now here's the strange twist. I want you to get this. Here's the strange twist. His kingship is so unique, unlike. Again, there's no place in the political system to go and say, his kingship is like that. There's no parallel to it. For instance, there's the President of the United States. Now, we need a president. Probably not the one we have, but we need a president. Why? Because I don't have time to mess with that stuff. You understand? I mean, somebody's got to take care of international things, and somebody's got to figure out the budget of the country, and there's got to be a president. Somebody, but you understand, he's president over there. And I don't mind that. But folks, the man doesn't come to my house. See, he doesn't sleep in my bed. He doesn't get up and eat breakfast with me. See, he's the president. We got to have one. Hey, take care of Washington. But I'm not in Washington. I'm here. And he doesn't bother me. What he does, health care, all that stuff. Indirectly, it filters down and affects me. But what I'm going to do tonight and tomorrow morning isn't really going to be dictated by him. Because he's king. Yeah, he's president. Yeah, but he's. But see, this is altogether different. Because the design of this kingship, as God set it up in the person of Jesus and the new covenant, is this king is going to come, and he's not going to be the universal king sitting on a throne, and I'm on the back row watching him with my binoculars, sleeping through most of it. It isn't that. See, this king is stomping right down, moving through the pores of my skin, getting inside of my flesh, and sits down at my table and eats my food and thinks my thoughts and tells my jokes and drives my car and goes to my job and kisses my wife. and he doesn't give me a minute's peace. That's pushy. See, I don't mind Jesus being king over there. See, somebody's got to do it. I got that. He can take care of gravity. I don't have time to do that anyhow. And he can take care of Mars and Jupiter and see that the planets operate properly. And he can do all that stuff. But hey, don't bother what I watch on TV. I mean, don't. But this kingship is an intimate king. You open to that? Of bringing everything in your life under the dictates of the only king that can be for life. And for sure, this is another strange twist of the whole thing. For sure, see, the first aspect is he's king not over there, he's king in here, and you become his throne. So everything in your life comes under the dictates of his rulership. That's the first strange twist of this. And the second strange twist of this is he won't share rulership with you. He won't share rulership with you. Well, I got my opinion. Doesn't count. Why? Because we've heard your opinion, and it's normally off base. You've lived on your opinion, and where did it get you? See, I've lived out of my opinion, and what did that do in my life? It ruined my relationships. It destroyed my living. It upset my... Hey, it didn't. Well, I've got a right to do what I like. You know what? The Chinese have a proverb. He who spits into the wind spits in his own face. Try it. It works. So I'll spit out the window if I want to. Oh. How did that work out? One guy said, when I do what I like, I don't like what I do. Because the bottom line, folks, is I was not built to do what I like. Because when I do what I like, you know what that does? That puts me in the realm of kingship. And he won't share kingship with me. I was built. Can you imagine this? God created me, you. He created us to be what? People who would be filled with his kingship and intimate with his mind and his thought process and the very flow of his life. And life functions best on that level. Now, the opposite of that in the passage is Herod. He's the epitome of self-centeredness. He's the epitome of self-centered carnality. A guy who's going to be his own king and do his own thing. Where does it get him? Well, it gets him into depression. You see it in verse 3. When Herod the king heard this, he was troubled. He was troubled. His whole insides were, and all Jerusalem with him, but there was this whole, see, the kingship of Jesus somehow brings me into depression. Pulls the rug right out from under me and puts me flat on my face. Every time. Why? If his kingship is not having its way, if I'm not, see, it didn't do that for the wise men. See, it built them. It gave them rest. It gave them peace. It's a phenomenal contrast. So here's Herod, who's all upset, and his life is in turmoil, and life is just, and he can't sleep at night, and he's wringing his hands, and he's filled with anxiety over against wise men who are bowing at the feet of Jesus, rejoicing with exceeding great joy. Stars are talking to him. And what's the difference? It's all over this kingship issue. It's an interesting contrast. Dishonesty. It brought him into dishonesty. He had to secretly call the wise men in. He secretly called them in. See, Herod is half Jewish and an Edomite, which is a descendant of Esau. So he has usurped the throne of Judah, saying, I am the king. And has in some cases, and at some times, has declared himself as a Messiah for the people of Judah. So in that context, you see, he's literally usurped the throne that Jesus alone belongs to. And what did that give him? It gave him dishonesty and deception as you move into verse 7. He secretly called the wise men and determined that from them what time the star appeared. He sent them to Jerusalem and said, go and search. Oh, what a con. Go and search carefully for the young child. He doesn't mean a word of it. And when you have found him, bring back word to me. I want to come and worship him. You liar. And it's going to bring him into the destruction of all the baby boys. Think of what kind of person you'd have to be to just make a statement and kill all baby boys in Bethlehem and the surrounding district. What would you have to be like inside? And the final result of the whole thing was in verse 19, when Herod was dead. It brought him to death. But that's the only place self-centeredness, your own kingship, can bring you. It always brings you to death. So, I'm trying to say to you, the whole passage screams at us. Come on. Jesus is king, man. Now, he's going to be king whether you let him be king or not, because he is who he is. But you can get in on it. You can get in on it. Your life can come under the wonder of a king who's pouring his life out for you. Jesus, I've been full of my ideas, haven't I? I've been filled with doing my own thing, haven't I? Even when I gave my life to you, supposedly, it was a con to get what I wanted. Because after all, I wouldn't want to die and go to hell. I've used you tried to manipulate your power, your position, acknowledge you as king when I thought it would benefit me. But to bow at your feet and allow you to be the intimate, reigning, influential king of my inner being. Oh, I want to do that tonight. I must do that tonight. You must have that position in my life. In the name of Jesus, I renounce all of my rights. I give up the right to my opinion. I give up the right to do what I want to do. I give up the right to go where I want to go. I give up the right to think what I want to think. I give up the right to spend what I want to spend. I give up my rights. That you might be who you are in my life. The only king. And what could be true in my life tonight, oh, it must be true in my life tonight, will be proven true in the sovereignty of your being in the ages to come. Heads are bowed. Think carefully. Have you bowed before Him, or have you used Him? Was your surrender to Him a con to get what you wanted? Did you manipulate Him so that you might have peace, you might have forgiveness, you might have heaven, you might get? Or did you just bow? Did you just bow? No agenda. And just acknowledge who He is in your life. Would you be willing tonight to take all the rights that you have supposedly got and bend them under His kingship, and let Him be who He is in your life? He will be the only King. He will not share the throne. Jesus, I want to come to you tonight like the wise men. For it's a wise thing to do. Our altar's open. Let's seek together.